very nice.
I told you.
What
yes.
a perfect invention. So, it gives me great pleasure to introduce today our second keynote speaker, Royal Highness Princess Dana Firas, that will come to speak about heritage changes, preserving our past and shaping a sustainable and just future. Princess Dana Firas was designated a UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador in June 2017 in recognition of her commitment to heritage protection. She serves as president of ICOMOS Jordan, and I'm very happy she was just elected ICOMOS board member. She is the president of the Petra National Trust, Jordan's oldest national non-governmental organization for heritage protection and preservation. In 2021, she became an ambassador for the UK-based International National Trust Organization, and in 2023, she joined the Board of Trustees of UK-based Turquoise Mountain, founded in 2006 by His Majesty the King Charles III to revive historic areas and traditional crafts. She served as co-chair of the Climate Heritage Network, COP27, and currently COP28 working group. Princess Dana Firas will share with us about the experience of the Petra National Trust and its evolution over the years with a programmatic development focused on heritage preservation, awareness, youth engagement, and community development. Her Royal Highness Princess Dana Firas, thank you very much for accepting our invitation to be our keynote speaker. Please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. مساء الخير جميعاً. السلام عليكم. Dear Teresa, Madam President, our President, delegates, ICOMOS members, honored guests, colleagues, and friends. I know she's not here, but I also want to acknowledge Auntie June. I stand here deeply moved and inspired by her strength and her truth. And I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we gather today. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all First People here today. Thank you, ICOMOS Australia, for the invitation. To Tracy Ireland, Peter Phillips, Richard Mackay, Helen Lardner, Rachel Jackson, and so many others for the warm hospitality and the incredible effort it took to pull together this exceptional gathering. I had intended to say a very deep thank you to Steve Brown and to Ona Velikas, but what a very tough act to follow. Their schedule should have been reversed. It is a pleasure, but thank you. Really, thank you for all the effort that you have done. I appreciate the invitation, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. It is a pleasure to be here in Sydney, and this is especially true for me as a Jordanian, because what is perhaps not very well known is that Australia had a hand in the birth of the modern state of Jordan. In 1918, Australian Light Horse Forces and later the Australian Flying Corps fought alongside the forces of the Great Arab Revolt against the Ottoman army. And with the battle won and the flag of the Great Arab Revolt raised over Amman in October 1918, events were set in motion leading to the establishment of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan and an enduring friendship between our two nations. It is also wonderful to meet so many of you here in person, finally. ICOMOS Jordan was established in 2019, and so our opportunity for person-to-person interaction was very brief. And like all of you, we utilized technology, lots of apps, to continue to work with the wider ICOMOS family during a challenging time. And we have learned much from all of you. And while we can always do more, ICOMOS has been on the forefront of the response to the changes that we have experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond, working with professionals, decision makers, and affected groups to advance our understanding of impacts, gain insight, and advocate for action to protect both people and heritage. And today, COVID-19 is only one of many urgent and transformative challenges that we have to adapt and respond to as a heritage sector. These challenges, these changes, are likely to define heritage, its value, and its relevance for the future. Heritage changes, and so must our understanding and our response. 3 areas of change are having a profound impact on heritage and on which I will spend some time speaking. Heritage and climate, heritage and crises, which includes COVID and conflict, and heritage and communities. And these are just pictures from Jordan, so I took the opportunity as well to show you the beautiful places that are in my country and the ancient and deep history of its people. According to UNESCO, heritage is our legacy from the past, what we live with today, and what we pass on to future generations. Our cultural and natural heritage are both irreplaceable sources of life and inspiration. And as heritage professionals, we recognize the universal values of heritage, but we also know that we look at heritage through subjective lenses. Whose legacy from the past do we choose to honor? Do we celebrate everyone's heritage equally? Do we make the same effort and commit equal resources to protect heritage across the globe? And it is critical that we engage with these questions very seriously as we consider the challenges that we all face today, including the climate crisis. We are facing global transformative change. It requires global solutions involving diverse communities, innovative approaches, and wide buy-in. And ICOMOS was a leader in recognizing that climate change was fast becoming one, and I quote, of the most significant and fastest growing threats to people and their cultural heritage worldwide. Climate change and cultural heritage are inextricably linked. Not only does climate change impact physical places and landscapes, but also the relationship that people have to these places and to one another. This summer, extreme weather events dominated the news cycle. We broke heat records week after week. We watched raging fires consume forests and neighborhoods, killing people and destroying places and countless lives. Time and time again, we witnessed how extreme weather phenomena inflict significant damage to archaeological sites and built structures, along with any movable objects, manuscripts, and artifacts contained within them. We saw significant loss and often irreversible damage to cultural heritage as a result of rising sea levels and climate-induced fires, winds, droughts, and changes in precipitation, flooding, and extreme temperatures. The toll on intangible cultural heritage was very heavy. The decline and disappearance of vegetation and plant and animal species alters living landscapes and important cultural practices and traditions and threatens food security. Climate-induced damage and loss changes people's relationship with each other, with the land, and with the places they identify with. Ultimately, it impacts their lives, livelihoods, and their way of life, reshaping economies, landscapes, and communities. Heritage changes with climate change. And the heritage community is responding. We saw this in our gathering over the past 2 days. Not only are there significant efforts to document and understand the impact climate change has on heritage, including vulnerability assessments and risk preparedness, but also, equally important, there is increasing recognition of how cultural heritage can contribute to building more resilient and adaptable communities. We, in the heritage community, particularly at ICOMOS, are working hard to ensure that this knowledge becomes more widely appreciated across sectors. In Jordan, and through the Petronational Trust and ICOMOS Jordan, we are working to build a climate heritage program to support efforts to understand these changes and develop appropriate response mechanisms. I will once again highlight the Preserving Legacies project that Will McGarry is leading. The Petra component, implemented by PNT in partnership with the local government agency, PDTRA, ICOMOS, the Climate Heritage Network, and National Geographic, will contribute to a better understanding of the actual impact of climate change on the site and on community vulnerability. This data will be used to develop actionable adaptation and management plans for the Petra region, including the archaeological site and the communities living around it. This project brings together scientific method using downscaled climate models relevant to the site to visualize the impact of climate change on heritage sites, a value assessment mapping key heritage values, followed by a vulnerability assessment and community engagement, assessing human values and drawing on community observations and local knowledge. Interestingly, the project team found that community observation and experience-based knowledge enhanced and sometimes provided additional information to that of climate change projections that were developed by climate scientists. The project places people and their experience as the basis for climate planning and action, and as you already heard, it is intended to be a wide-reaching global initiative. This and similar studies document how cultural heritage is a key source of resilience and strength, necessary for enabling the global community to find ways to mitigate, adapt to, and survive climate change. And cultural heritage enables communities to come together around traditional systems of support through social cohesion and communal solidarity to cope with stress and change. These informal systems focus on inherited values of trust, social networks, and place attachment, all critical to how communities come together and survive in times of challenge. Cultural heritage honors important but often unrecognized local, traditional, and indigenous knowledge and skills, as well as time-honored technologies, including historical learning through practice and adaptation. It acknowledges resource-based livelihoods, traditional use of the land for subsistence, and sustainable management of resources, all critical to building the capacity to learn, adapt, and persist in difficult times. And we know that any successful effort at real, actionable change will require global and society-wide transformation implemented at all levels and among all communities. This extensive buy-in can only be achieved when all communities are understood and acknowledged. And when everyone is heard, we move further along the path of equity and justice. And heritage reflects diversity and incorporates unique and differing worldviews and belief systems and languages, values. As a heritage community, we must recognize this diversity deliberately and create the space for dialogue and exchange to foster interconnectedness and adaptive learning. But we must remain realistic, honest, and acutely aware that the decision to valorize and celebrate cultural heritage, inclusion, and diversity is a deliberate and political decision. The onus is on us as a heritage community to advocate for heritage at all levels of decision-making and action, and also to respond to the changes to ensure that a safe space is created for all voices, for diverse perspectives, and for continued learning. PNT and the Climate Heritage Network, an ICOMOS-affiliated informal alliance of individuals, private and public organizations from the culture sector, is engaged in a leading effort to incorporate culture, heritage, and the arts in the climate change agenda. At COP27, the CHN launched the Sharm el-Sheikh Declaration on Culture-Based Climate Action at a ministerial session held at the Presidency Pavilion during Solutions Day with the support of the governments of Jordan and Egypt. Formal government support for a declaration. The Sharm el-Sheikh Declaration aimed to enhance climate action with culture-based solutions and to embed culture more directly into the climate agenda and the COP process. It emphasized the role that culture and heritage play, I quote, to help imagine and realize low-carbon, just, climate-resilient futures to meet the objectives of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, including those related to mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, and promotion of climate-resilient sustainable development. This year, in anticipation of COP28, we have been engaged with the government of the United Arab Emirates, this year's hosts, to build on the progress achieved and work towards the adoption of a joint work decision, the more formal process through which culture and heritage can be fully integrated into climate action globally. So this is a call for action. We need all of you to lobby governments and to lend your voice, your resources, your support in whatever way you can to this effort. Climate change is an urgent global crisis, but it's not only the one we are facing. Of course, crises are not mutually exclusive, and in their causes, impact, and potential solutions, there are many intersections and overlaps. The immediate impact of the COVID pandemic on the heritage sector was devastating, but we continue to grapple with its long-term consequences. And in 2019, much of the world, or 2020, much of the world came to a standstill in the face of a virus that took an estimated 7 million lives worldwide. And Jordan implemented a strict lockdown, which brought travel and cross-border movement to a standstill, followed by months of curfews and closures. The impact on the heritage community was profound. One result, which has persisted, was the deprioritization of heritage. During the pandemic, emergency funds were set up to support the needs of the medical sector and humanitarian relief as an immediate priority. Support for what was considered non-essential sectors, including heritage, faltered. In the aftermath of the pandemic, political priorities shifted to job creation and economic stimulation, leaving heritage towards the bottom of the national priority ladder. For us in the heritage sector, our advocacy efforts became more important than ever before and continue to be so. We have to be persistent, and we have to make the case for heritage and link it very clearly to sustainable development, growth, and jobs. Jordan's strict COVID-19 measures meant sites remained closed for months without visitation or any activity. This resulted in delays in needed conservation and maintenance, particularly in open areas exposed to the elements. And there were also very serious concerns and problems with the potential for human-caused damage at archaeological sites, including by looters seeking objects to sell on the illicit antiquities market. COVID-19 also affected the tourism industry and related jobs very seriously, not only in Jordan, but globally. But in Jordan, tourism really matters. Tourism is responsible for about 20% of Jordan's gross domestic product, and if we include its impact on other sectors and the informal economy, it is the largest employer outside of the state. At PNT, we had to make quick changes to adapt to the changing needs of the heritage sector. Luckily, we were small enough and nimble enough to manage, and we learned lessons that continue to inform our planning and work programs. First, our small contingency fund was too small. During the pandemic, our income went down to zero. So today, we have to focus on building a heritage endowment fund and to ensure long-term financial viability for PNT, but also for the heritage sector in general. We need to diversify economic activity around heritage to move away from a singular focus on tourism. Communities in and around heritage sites throughout Jordan suffered very deep economic marginalization during COVID. Their income also went down to zero because they were 100% reliant on tourism. And when no one else was doing anything, PNT went into the field in masks, gloves, and with countless bottles of hand sanitizer, and conducted training activities with local communities to build their capacity to establish businesses and market online to generate income from crafts and small heritage-related industries. Finally, we have to incorporate technological innovation in heritage preservation, promotion, and knowledge. And at PNT, we did this with our cultural education curricula. We have developed an online platform to benefit students in Jordan and the region. Many spoke of the great pause of 2020 as an opportunity for the heritage community to think about future approaches and build back better by learning from experience. Regrettably, in the heritage field, at least in Jordan, we did not take full advantage of that opportunity. Since 2021, and as soon as we could, we returned to business as usual. Today, it is all about the numbers. And I know that Jordan is not unique in this, but it really makes a difference in Jordan. Reports indicate that Jordan's tourism income surged 88.4% in the first quarter of 2023, and it's only been increasing since, compared to the same period in 2022. In addition, this year, in that first quarter only, we saw a doubling of the number of visitors coming to Jordan compared to all of last year. We had an opportunity to consider our strategic approach to tourism development. We talked about it often enough. To adopt a strategy that aims to protect that very resource on which the tourism industry is built. And we could have integrated heritage much more closely with economic priorities. We have to do a better job. We must adapt our efforts to those changing priorities. We have to work together as an international heritage community to advocate for heritage, and we have to redouble our efforts to demonstrate the role of heritage in promoting growth and advancing the Sustainable Development Goals. This is why the work of the ICOMOS SDG Working Group is very important to us. We have to focus on the knowledge base that can inform our efforts as advocates and generate the political will needed to support heritage by aligning it with development priorities. And we cannot speak about crises without addressing conflict. My region of the world is where the story of human civilization began. It is blessed with innumerable archaeological treasures that chronicle our past and our evolution as societies. It is a wellspring of culture and science, an epicenter of connectivity among peoples, and a cultural, historic, religious, and economic crossroads for thousands and thousands of years. It tells the story of human connections and of the flow of people, ideas, and materials. And yet, since the Second World War, our region has seen a major conflict every single decade. And the carnage continues with devastating effect on people and all that surrounds and nurtures them. In the aftermath of conflict, it is difficult to rebuild, but almost unimaginable under the heavy mental, emotional, and physical burden of successive wars. The tragedies we have witnessed include the loss of human life and potential, and also the destruction of important cultural heritage and archaeological sites. When sites, monuments, museums, or mosques are destroyed, we are struck painfully by the vulnerability of heritage and the finality of its destruction. But a community's values, identity, and sense of self are also a part of its cultural heritage. And any deliberate attack on customs, oral traditions, religious beliefs, ways of life, or artistic expression is an act of violence against people and the collective memory of communities. And it is very difficult to rebuild that. Heritage lies at the heart of the root causes of conflict. We have to consider the question of whose heritage. If we espouse values that valorize one group over another, one way of life over another, we exclude and we demonize, and we make it much easier to attack that other. As a heritage community, we are the first line of defense. We cannot stay silent when we see a deliberate attempt to erase history or memory, whether it happens in Kiev or in Jerusalem. The global response, including ICOMOS, to the destruction of heritage in the Ukraine, serves as an excellent example of global solidarity and action for heritage. But ultimately, we have to respond and build a paradigm that places human dignity at the core of our approaches to the protection and continuity of cultural heritage and to how we define heritage and what is important to us. This relationship that communities have with their heritage is not static. It changes and it evolves in response to circumstances and context, to human needs and priorities, and to awareness and understanding. Heritage is a value-based concept. We make decisions as to which part of our past we choose to treasure. Do we treasure everything equally? Recent social justice movements have challenged traditional approaches to heritage, and as Auntie Jude said, rightly so. We must continue to commit to do so. Heritage changes because what people value and what heritage means to different communities, particularly in the aftermath of crises and human suffering, is born out of current experiences and priorities. We have to engage meaningfully and consistently with communities through programs that reflect diverse and evolving views on heritage, keeping in focus the universal values of justice, equity, and dignity. At PNT, this has been the focus of our cultural education program, designed for and with children and youth ages 7 to 18 and their teachers. And in response to our observations of a disconnect between local communities and heritage sites, in 2010, PNT piloted an education outreach and awareness initiative developed with local and international education experts and local teachers in Petra. Initially, PNT's program aimed to instill in participants the values that render Petra a World Heritage Site: historic, archaeological, cultural, environmental, and economic. It was intended to re-establish communities' relationship with the heritage site and emphasize the importance of its preservation for the benefit of the local residents, Jordan, and the world. But the program evolved to provide young people with engaged and interactive opportunities to learn about the rich history of the various civilizations that have made Petra their home. The program encouraged children and youth to take ownership of that heritage by forging a sense of pride in their identity as modern-day heirs to the legacies of past cultures, be they prehistoric, Nabatean, Roman, Byzantine, or Islamic. The program included a strong civic engagement component that was values-based and focused on developing a sense of responsibility, respect for the site and for one another, critical thinking skills, and creative approaches to problem solving. And since 2015, recognizing the need to improve its reach and impact, PNT expanded its cultural education programs to children, youth, and teachers throughout Jordan, and since 2019, to other countries in the region. Our goal is to promote meaningful engagement with heritage among communities from a young age. If we subscribe to an ethos of justice, equity, and dignity, which we should, our responsibility as heritage professionals and organizations is to contribute to building a heritage landscape that acknowledges change, celebrates diversity, promotes inclusivity, and honors human dignity. Our job is to keep heritage relevant and valuable for all communities. And for this to happen, everyone must have a seat at the table, and collaboration is critical. As a heritage community, we have to embrace equitable and meaningful collaboration across borders, sectors, peoples. ICOMOS is uniquely placed to set an example. Through its structure, built on national committees and international scientific committees, the work of ICOMOS is global, transversal, and cross-sectoral. And we have to commit to deepening the inclusivity of this organization, whether in representation or on topics and issues of interest. And we must engage with international organizations, governments, and concerned experts and groups to continue to work together to develop support and implement immediate action for crises. And we have to identify the risks to heritage, conduct vulnerability analyses, and mobilize resources on the basis of universal, non-political criteria to bolster local and international efforts to prioritize heritage when times are hard. And we must strengthen civil society and non-governmental organizations. I think we are uniquely placed to do that. Often, government's priority is humanitarian first and political second, to try to resolve instability in times of crisis. And heritage-focused civil society can be the first responder to protect heritage assets. They're knowledgeable, nimble, committed to protection, and are usually locally established and well-connected. And it is important to bring heritage NGOs on board to ensure that they are acknowledged and advocates for making protection of cultural heritage a national government priority, both as a result of conflict and as a development and human need. It is what we try to do all the time at PNT. We are an advocacy organization. We work to ensure that cultural heritage is appreciated for its intrinsic value as a depository of a nation's history, values, and identity, as a living and evolving web of communal spaces and interactions, and as a tangible reminder of a rich and diverse past that connects Jordan to the world through a common thread of human history and shared human values, which shaped not only Jordan, but the countries and cultures with which it connected. A 2014 survey by Peter Fisher at the University of Gothenburg established Jordan's connection to Europe as early as 1100 BC, which contributed to a wider Mediterranean culture that grew and was shaped by the flow of people, the exchange of goods, and the merging of ideas and cultures. And this is, of course, at the heart of how cultural heritage affects us all and why it really matters. If we do not commit to the reframing of the entire socio-political narrative to put human dignity at the heart of laws, policies, and programs, we will fail to respond adequately to a changing heritage landscape. Cultural heritage changes in response to events that reshape the natural, social, economic, and political world around us. The key to the protection and preservation of cultural heritage lies in a better understanding of its value and importance to our daily lives, our understanding of the past, our journey as people, and our interconnections, past, present, and future, each in their own way. Thank you once again to ICOMOS Australia for the invitation. And I would also like just to take a minute to acknowledge the hard work of the ICOMOS board and ADCOM, but especially the Secretariat and the entire team at headquarters for their support and dedication to ICOMOS and to us in national committees worldwide. Thank you all very much for listening.